your big rocks for reading instruction? In other words, what are those 2 or 3 non-negotiables, the activities that you emphasize every day that are high priorities for you, that help you when you get overwhelmed by all the things you have to do? What are those couple of activities that are core for you in your reading instruction? That's what we're going to be talking about today here at Reading Simplified. I'm Dr. Marnie Ginsberg, and at Reading Simplified, it's our job to talk about how to streamline reading instruction for classroom teachers or for parents, homeschool parents, tutors, mentors, and also, more importantly, maybe how to accelerate reading achievement for everyone. If we want to fill this jar and we can't fill it beyond, the top brim with pebbles and sand and dirt and rocks, what's the best way to fill it? Well, have you heard the story? If you start with the small stuff, the dirt, the sand, the pebbles, then the bigger rocks, guess what happens to the big rocks? They can't get in, right? Are you familiar with that story? So what is it that we're told to do with this analogy? When we think about our priorities in life, the things that are important to us in any domain, whether it's our family life, our work life, or our reading instruction, what do we have to do to make sure that we're getting the right stuff in the jar? In other words, we're getting our priorities in the right order. We're accomplishing the things that are most important. I should pour this out, and what should I do? I should start with my big rocks, right? So starting with our big rocks will allow us to fill in the cracks with the lesser items. The items of lesser priority. They will just fit in around the cracks, but the big rocks have to go in first. They have to be that priority for us. Well, the 2 big rocks, these 2 purple circles, for me, they are the teacher read aloud and the student read aloud, or any time of students focused on reading practice. Okay, so why did I pick those 2? Definitely these 2 things are big rocks for me from my experience working with students who are struggling and helping them to solve their problems. I get to look at a lot of student reading achievement data, standardized test scores in lots of different domains, and I can see what things I can shift with instruction, and I can see which variables or areas of reading are their weaknesses. So I instruct kids, get them up to grade level or beyond, and I can see what are the domains that they need help with and what really matters for reading. But that's not it. Of course, there's also a lot of good reading research behind this. Reading achievement is equal to decoding times listening comprehension. Now, this actually has been shown to not be 100% what reading actually is representative. If you were to think of reading, all the different things that it takes to be a good reader as this, the simple view would maybe just encompass slightly less than that. But it encompasses so much, it does explain a lot about what's going on with our readers. So if we are doing these 2 actions, this teacher read aloud and the student read aloud, we are basically hitting those 2 areas that is the simple view of reading, that we're going to be moving reading achievement, because decoding is the foundation of learning word identification and becoming fluent. And so the only way students are going to gain that area is if they practice, right, with feedback from the teacher. And then listening comprehension is dependent upon our language abilities, oral language abilities, our vocabulary. What's the best place for them to get that besides adult speech? It's really reading aloud, hearing things that are above their reading level that gives them exposure to new words, new concepts. The stepping stones to reading achievement in that decoding domain, they start with that sound-based decoding. So in the first few weeks of school, we're going to get even our kindergartners who may not know any letter sounds, we're going to get them into that first step of the road to reading achievement for the decoding domain. They need to figure out how sounds and symbols align And then at the same time, they need to get feedback from the teacher, and then they need to practice it. So that's going to be our lens for the first 3 weeks of school. How do we get kids, even if they're beginners, or even if they're super struggling, how do we get them to be successful enough at sound-based decoding that they can practice it with some enjoyment and get feedback to keep growing? And on that basis, then they become automatic at their word recognition, which is really a huge hurdle and a very big sign that they're on the right track to being good readers. And then that means they're fluent after that. And so you've got the success pathway, especially for that decoding domain. One of the best papers about the benefits of reading in general is what reading does for the mind. One of the key things that this paper points out that really kind of blows my mind is a study of different types of words in different types of text and how rare they are. So this chart here lists the rarity of words in different types of genres. So at the top you'd see printed text, abstracts of scientific articles. Okay, so the rare words are 128 words that are rare per 1,000. Okay, so that makes sense. If you're in a scientific journal, it's going to be pretty rare. But what about in college graduates talking to friends? This is actually not text. This is just when college graduates are talking. Wouldn't they have sophisticated vocabulary? Well, they only have 17 rare words per 1,000. So you can see the difference between the abstracts of scientific articles being at 128 versus the college graduates. But what I think is most exciting is look at this line here for children's books. 30.9 rare words per 1,000. In other words, when we're reading aloud to children, we are giving them exposure to language that they do not hear, even if they're talking all day long to college-educated adults, or even if they're listening and discussing things with college-educated adults. Speech is kind of at this level, whereas written text is at this level. So the read aloud is that window into that vocabulary and the background knowledge. So these two things that I've been pointing towards here are why is reading aloud so important? This article will give you some good benefits about reading in general, and this study in particular within there shows, goodness, the children's books, we don't have anything to be ashamed of. Even when we're reading the simplest children's book, they have a tone, a cadence, and a vocabulary that is more sophisticated than adult speech. So we are giving them the vocabulary that they need, because again, what was the simple view of reading? Listening comprehension is one half of that equation, and the read aloud is the best way to give them that. Before we wrap up, I also want to introduce you to something new that I'm doing. We're going to be doing a new workshop. So we had 2 lately, 3 activities a day to keep reading difficulties away, and making phonics stick. So those have been big hits, and I'm excited for us to have a 3rd one. It's coming next week. So if you want to be invited to that and not miss out, then you could go here, readingsimplified.com/leapfrog. We're going to be talking about how to leap ahead 1 to 3 months growth by getting rid of 3 things that kind of drag us down and replacing it with 3 things that will accelerate our kiddos. This is especially important for those of you who are at the beginning of the school year, because particularly in K1 instruction, and to some extent even in 2nd grade, there's a lot of stuff at the beginning of the year that's super inefficient, and we have some activities that turn the system on its head, and so those kids move really quickly into reading. So I'm excited about that workshop. We're putting it together, and if you go to readingsimplified.com/leapfrog, you'll get an invitation to participate in that workshop.